Well, it was a terrible weekend in America, and there's really no other way to put it. We're at the point now where a few times a year something like this happens, and it hasn't always been that way. To have 9 of the top 12 deadliest mass shootings in just the last 11 or 12 years, that's incredible. That is an incredible fact that we shouldn't just get used to or say, okay, but still. Overall, the murder numbers are down. We're not talking about overall numbers. This is a problem. It shouldn't be like this. We shouldn't take it for granted. It shouldn't. When I remember being a kid, I remember when Columbine happened, and it was the only thing anyone talked about for months on end because no one had ever heard of anything like this happening before. And now it's these mass shootings, by Wednesday, we won't even be talking about them anymore because we're so used to it. And that is a problem, obviously. The Dayton shooter apparently had a hit list when he was in high school. He was caught with a hit list and a rape list of people he wanted to kill and people he wanted to rape. He was suspended from school for it. Now, every sane person agrees that if you have a hit list and it's known that you have a hit list, you shouldn't be able to buy a gun. I think every sane person agrees with that. I mean, I'm a big Second Amendment advocate, but if you're telling me it should be illegal for someone with a hit list to buy a gun, I totally agree. Obviously, I agree. I'd be crazy not to agree with that. So I think if we want to understand the current epidemic, we have to look at factors that are themselves current. See, that makes sense to me. If we're noticing that this problem is getting worse in modern times, especially in the last 10 or 20 years, then it makes sense to look and see, okay, what has changed in society in the last 10 or 20 years? Number one, the internet, okay? I think the effect the internet has on our culture and on us psychologically as people, as individuals, is something that we haven't even begun to understand or appreciate. When you're a sociopath on the internet, it may be possible for a while to be a sociopath on the internet and act like a normal person in, quote, the real world in three-dimensional space. Eventually, though, so you're not going to be able to keep up that double life, that split personality forever. Eventually, you're either going to start being a decent person on the internet, or more likely what happens is that you end up being a sociopath in, quote, the real world also. Number two, 24-hour cable news. The problem with 24-hour cable news is twofold. For one thing, it makes every mass shooting into a whole big television event and thereby encourages mass shooters to do this because they're looking for attention, they're looking for infamy, and they know they're going to get it. So we all know that part of it, right? We point that out all the time. The second thing, though, the slightly less discussed element here is that 24-hour news encourages us again to be detached from reality. It encourages us to see these shootings like they're TV shows, like it's a plot line on Law and Order or something. Number three, broken homes. Now, broken homes have always existed. There's always been divorce. There's always been deadbeat dads and so on. But as almost everyone knows, that problem has gotten worse in the last few decades. And we now have 2 generations of people, my generation and the next generation, who, a wide swaths of people in those generations have grown up in or are growing up in homes that there's no father present. The marriage is broken or falling apart. They're living amidst emotional turmoil. And that obviously plays a factor here. The fourth thing, psychiatric drugs. Okay. We know that dozens of violent attacks in schools have been carried out by kids on or withdrawing from psychiatric drugs. But not just kids and not just schools. The Las Vegas shooter was on anxiety medicine. The Colorado theater shooter was on antidepressants. The Charleston shooter was on psychiatric drugs. The Virginia Tech shooter was on psychiatric drugs. Many, and again, the most recent ones, we don't know. But we're not going to be surprised to find out, if it is the case, that they were on some kind of medication or just came off of it. If you have someone from a broken home, with a history of living in a home of emotional chaos and abuse and abandonment and neglect, put them on the internet for hours a day, maybe start shoving some psychiatric drugs into their head, have them watching cable news, watching the other mass shooters, and seeing the infamy and notoriety that those other mass shooters attain. and then you throw in maybe an extremist ideology, you throw in a little bit of racism, some hatred, you throw in laws that are not being enforced that make it easier for them to attain deadly weapons when they shouldn't be able to, even according to the laws we already have on the books. Put all that together, and it's not hard to see how we end up where we are right now.